Hello, 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 and welcome to a very special episode of the Babe Bulletin podcast, where we talk empowerment, self-love, boudoir, and anything else that makes us feel like a babe. I am Alicia. I am a boudoir photographer in Port Washington, Wisconsin, and today is a really special episode because we're chatting all things spooky. I'm a big fan of Halloween. We're in October now. I'm trying to cultivate the spooky vibes. I've got my pumpkin shirt on. I am rocking earrings that say thick thighs and spooky vibes. So I'm really trying to get into this season. And I want you to join me. And we'll be chatting about some really cool movies. But before we get into that, I just want to say, where are my other spooky Halloween lovers at? Because this is definitely a season that I've always loved. I like horror movies a lot, but just everything about Halloween in general, I'm a big fan of. Pumpkins, costumes, little tiny fun-sized candy bars. I mean, what is not to love about that? And Halloween, I feel like, is a time where people, I don't know, they just get to hang out and have fun. There's way less stress involved, which is why I think I love it so much. People aren't stressing about what food to make or whose house you're going to. It's just about fun and dress up and safely getting scared and all of the cool spooky vibes, which it just makes my heart very happy. So if you are a fellow spooky girl or spooky guy and you're listening to this, cool. I'm excited to run through some of my favorite Halloween movies with you that really highlight and showcase the badassery of women. So that's what we're going to be chatting about today. These movies, I'm not going to say that they're uber feminist or that they pass the Bechdel test or anything like that. They highlight women, though, that when I got done watching these movies, I was like, yeah, those are really cool ladies. I want to be more like them. They're strong, confident, or they've had these big discoveries about themselves. And I left the movies feeling like, hell yeah, okay, I can get down with this. So that's what we're going to be breaking down today. And I'm going to let you know right now, there are spoilers. So if you do not want something spoiled, go ahead and check out the timestamps that are in the description, and you can pick and choose which movies you want to listen to. So let's go ahead and just jump right in. Our first film is Ready or Not. This came out in 2019. And if you're not familiar with this film, I'll give you a really quick plot breakdown. So the movie opens with a little boy. His name is Daniel. He's in his family's mansion, and there's this guy named Charles who is begging him for help. Charles is wounded. Daniel, instead of helping, alerts his family, who all show up in these masks and robes. And despite this woman named Helene, she's begging for Charles' life, they shoot Charles with a spear gun and he is dragged away. Okay. That's how this movie opens. Years later, we've got Daniel's brother. His name is Alex. He's estranged from the family. He shows up. He's getting married to a woman named Grace. Grace is a foster child, and Grace is going to be our badass. Grace is I want to meet your family because they're my family now too. We just got married and I want to know your family. And Alex is kind of I don't know about that, but they all meet. And the father-in-law, Tony, explains to Grace that his family made a deal with someone named LaBelle to build their family fortune in exchange for the family observing a tradition. Here's the spoiler. Oh, LaBelle, guess what? That's the devil. So spooky, not good agreements being made by this family. The tradition is that on a wedding day, the new family member has to draw a game card out of LaBelle's puzzle box, and Grace draws a card that's called hide and seek. Now she's like, okay, hide and seek, that's a kid's game. I'm down to play. This will be totally fine. But what she doesn't know as she runs away to go and hide is that members of the family start pulling out weapons, and this turns into a super duper dangerous game of hide and seek. Alex reveals that his family is cursed, and turns out that the hide and seek card is actually a ritualistic sacrifice card, and Grace is going to need to be killed by the family before the sun rises. So there is a ticking clock in this movie. Grace sees one of the daughters accidentally kill a maid. She is trying to get away from the family butler, whose name is Stevens. There's a lot of really horror movie fun kills in this, and a lot of injuries that are, fun to watch if you're into that kind of thing. And the grossest part, in my opinion, of this movie is when Grace, oh man, she has to go to a goat shed and she gets shot in the hand, and she manages to knock out the person who shot her, but then she falls into this pit that is filled with all of the corpses that this family has sacrificed. It is super gnarly. But again, Grace never at any point gives up. She is a fighter the whole way through this movie. She's super clever. She does get out of the pit. She manages to run through the woods. And when you're like, yes, she's finally going to get away, she is unfortunately captured by the butler, Stevens. Does she just give up? No. She's in the car with him. When she wakes up, she attacks him. This causes the car to crash. She ends up, this inevitably then kills Stevens. And one of the other sons, Daniel, right, the little boy that we saw in the very beginning, who is super traumatized by all of this, understandably so, and he doesn't really vibe with what his family is doing. He catches Grace, and he realizes that his father is secretly watching them, so he has to catch Grace. And he brings Grace to the family, and as they're getting ready to sacrifice her, they all start to get sick, and that is because Daniel has poisoned them with the hydrochloric acid. There we go. He does his best to protect Grace. He gets shot. Bummer. So now he's bleeding death. Grace runs away again. Again, Grace, being the baddie that she is like every opportunity she has to escape, she's taken it. Somehow the mansion is set on fire. I don't really remember how, but now the mansion is on fire. Grace is attacked again by another family member who she beats to death. It's a very impressive scene. Good on you, Grace. And then again, she is captured, which really sucks. And who is she captured by? Alex, her new husband. Alex has had this realization that Grace is never going to trust him again. She'll never love him. And once she escapes, she's probably going to leave him. So Alex is like, if I can't have her, why destroy my entire family at the same time? So Alex sucks. We don't like Alex. He catches Grace. The ritual is going to start all over again. But the cool thing about Grace, like I said, she never gives up. She's looking for a way to escape every single time. And she gets off of that ritual table right as sun rises, which again is that was the ticking clock. So she gets off this table. She's won the game. Helene attempts to attack her anyways, and Helene explodes. It's pretty impressive in terms of special effects or CGI. And one by one, every member of the family explodes, leaving only Alex. And Alex tries to get Grace to forgive him, and she refuses. And she throws her ring at him. She says she wants a divorce. And then Alex explodes as well. It is a very insane remaining 15 minutes of this movie. And like I said, the reason that this is such, to me, an incredible final girl film is because Grace is clever. She's very smart. I don't recall her really doing anything stupid or dumb in this film, which I feel like when we're talking about horror movies from the 70s and 80s, there were a lot of really dumb things that went down in some of those where you're like, why did you do that? Why? No, Grace doesn't do anything like that. Like I said, she crawls through a goat shed, with a pit in a goat shed, which is filled with really old, nasty, disgusting corpses. And anyone who can do that and escape and survive is going to be a badass in my book. This is a super fun watch. If you're looking for something that's got some humor in it and isn't super duper scary, I highly recommend. It's really fun. And the woman comes out on top. She's a really fun protagonist to watch. You're really rooting for her. You are on the edge of your seat. You want her to win. And she does. She gets caught a lot, but she manages to escape a lot. And I think it's a really fun watch if you want something that's not super duper scary and we get to have a winner who's a woman. So I would recommend checking out Ready or Not. The next movie that I would recommend if you're looking for a really fantastic female protagonist is Teeth. And you might, if you've already seen Teeth, you might be like, that's not like really the strongest lead character though, who's a woman. And for me, it is because I relate a lot to kind of this protagonist in some ways. A quick breakdown, and I'll give you a trigger warning right now. There's a lot of essay in this movie, and I'll use the word grape because I believe on certain streaming platforms I cannot use the actual terms. I'm not trying to remove the seriousness of those issues, but if I use the actual terms, the streaming services won't let us put this up. So we'll be using essay and grape. I'm letting you know that happens in this movie. And if you don't want to hear about that, that's totally fine. You can check out the timestamps and skip to another movie. But this movie, to me, is really important because it handles these issues in a way that a lot of horror movies do not. So, quick plot breakdown. We've got Dawn. She is a teenage spokesperson for a Christian abstinence group. And that's kind of what I relate to very much with her. I also grew up in purity culture, and I very much grew up around the idea that like virginity and your self-worth were tied together very closely, and that if girls had sex before they got married, that our value greatly diminished. So as I'm watching this, I'm like, I feel that. I know where she's coming from. So Dawn, like I said, she's in this group. She gets introduced to a young man named Toby. And they all start to hang out as a group. And Dawn and Toby, they like each other. They're attracted to each other. And they agree that they probably shouldn't spend any time alone because that would just be too much of a temptation. However, later they kind of give in and they do meet up at a swimming hole and they start kissing, and Dawn gets uncomfortable and tells Toby to like go back outside. And this is where Toby turns into a real prick and he becomes aggressive and she tries to push him off and he doesn't let her. And as Toby SAs her, she fights back and, well, spoiler alert, his dick is cut off. Somehow. We don't know how. Dawn is terrified and runs away. This continues to happen to her. And again, I don't want to go into too much detail, but she is essayed by her gynecologist, by this other guy named Ryan, who she goes to. She's looking for help. He is he's like the worst. He's just the worst. And also by her stepbrother. So there's a lot of gnarly stuff that happens to Dawn in this movie. And it is a hard watch. I'm not going to pretend like it isn't. Every single time, Dawn's body reacts and physically harms the men who are essaying her. And we love to see that. And that's really what I think this movie does well. It's not gratuitous. It doesn't show like the violence of her being raped, and instead it really focuses on the immediate revenge that her body is able to get on these men. And that's not something that you see in horror movies like ever. There's kind of this idea of her body like evolutionizing. I'm not sure if that's a word, but like changing and adapting to become a predator instead of prey. And the movie really focuses on Dawn being afraid of her own body and not figuring out why this is happening. And then she gets to have this realization near the end of the film that she has been misdirecting her fear and that she doesn't need to be repulsed by her own body. And instead, this curse or whatever you want to call it is more of a super power than a monstrosity. So, yeah, she's able to get revenge on all of the men who have viewed her body as something that they're just entitled to. And she gets her revenge immediately. She gets to have those moments, and she, at the end of the movie, decides to become essentially a vigilante. And she's going to travel and prey upon men who have ill intentions and who think they can just take advantage of the vulnerability of women that they encounter. She really becomes this heroic figure, and you see it just in the last moments where she kind of she's been picked up by a trucker. She's hitchhiking, and when she's ready to leave, the driver locks the door, and she just turns around and smiles, and you're like, oh yeah, she's gonna use this quote unquote curse to get immediate retribution, and she's gonna go out there and castrate men who feel entitled to her body. And we just love to see that. And like I said, I related to the like purity culture of this movie. I related to the virginity tied into self-worth part of this movie very much. And I think a lot of us could also relate to the idea of like, oh, there's something wrong with my body. I'm gross, or I have this problem. And instead of fearing our own bodies, trying to turn that into like our superpower instead. I just love that message. So yes, this movie can be a very hard watch, but it really does focus on Dawn's journey of self-discovery, her rejection of sexual repression, and you get to see immediate revenge, which is a fresh take for a lot of horror movies, especially those that show rape and SA. I do very much appreciate that this movie is not focused on a very long, drawn-out, gratuitous scene, and instead we get right to the point, which is that men who want to SA women should get their dicks cut off. And I am here for that message. Okay, movie number 3, Jennifer's Body. This is like a cult classic. I did not see this movie until like 2 years ago, but I really, really enjoyed it. And I remember having a super fun time watching it and being really happy that there was a horror movie out there that focused on female friendship. That is just not a theme that comes through in a lot of scary movies. Okay, quick plot breakdown. If you have not seen this movie, it's another one where like there's comedy mixed into horror. It kind of reminds me the same tone as like Ready or Not. We're gonna follow 2 friends, Anita and Jennifer. Jennifer is kind of Jennifer has a little more power in their friendship than Anita, who's also called Needy. Needy is a little more insecure. She's living in a little town in Minnesota. And then her best friend, Jennifer, is very popular, very beautiful. They don't really have too much in common, but they are very close. And Jennifer wants to go and see this rock band. The bar that the rock band is performing at starts on fire, kills several people. Really a bummer. Jennifer's in shock from the fire, and Needy is like, hey, you see that band? You know, the band that we were here to see? Don't go with them. The band wants Jennifer to go with them. Well, she does. Jennifer takes off with the band. We don't know where she goes. That same night, Jennifer shows up to Needy's kitchen. She's covered in blood. She's eating a full rotisserie chicken, and she throws up. There's black fluid all over. She almost hurts Needy, but she does not, and instead she retreats. She leaves. When Jennifer shows up to school the next day, she seems totally fine. She dismisses Needy's concerns. She seems really apathetic about the bar fire, and she goes around and begins disemboweling and cannibalizing men in their school. It's done first with the school's football captain, and then eventually she goes on a date with this guy named Colin and just starts terrorizing the boys in this high school. And Needy is like, what's going on. She starts to investigate her friend and all of these mysterious murders because nobody knows that Jennifer is the one who's doing it. And she starts checking out the occult section of the library. She realizes that Jennifer is actually a succubus, and Jennifer has to feed on flesh, and she can only be killed when she's very hungry and weak. And the movie is so fun because it's exploring their friendship and what it means to be a female and a friend going through puberty in high school, and like it's so hard in high school for everyone. And what does it look like if you're like a young woman and you're trying to maintain your friendship and also date boys, and like all of this. The virginity thing is tied back in. The whole reason that Jennifer became a succubus is because she told the band, I'm a virgin. And then the band was like, oh, cool, we're going to sacrifice you to the devil in order to become popular and wealthy. But it didn't work because Jennifer wasn't actually a virgin. So there's that whole like the value of virginity to men and what that means for women and how that harms women, and that whole message is in there as well. And it's a fun watch. It's a difficult watch sometimes because you see this friendship and you're like, you just want it to work out, but one of them is a demon-possessed person now, so you're like, it's probably not going to work out. And Needy has to be brave, and she has to kind of come into her own because her friend isn't her friend anymore. There's a lot of really interesting fight scenes, fun death kills. Again, if you're watching a horror movie, I assume that's what you came to see. There's some very interesting pools, a very fun battle scene in a pool. And it does end in tragedy. We kind of knew that was coming. Needy has to unfortunately kill Jennifer, but at the same time, she's sort of freeing her from being this succubus. Needy then is caught. She has to go to a mental facility. She escapes. She hitchhikes. And we discover that she ends up killing the entire band who did this to Jennifer. So we do love to see women getting revenge. That works for me, especially in a horror movie. The writer and producer of this movie, Diablo Cody, she said that she really wanted this movie to speak to female empowerment and explore this like really complicated relationship between best friends. The director and her said that they wanted to subvert the classic horror model of women being terrorized, which I love a flip in a horror movie like that. They wanted to write roles that serviced women and tell stories from a female perspective, especially in something as male-dominated as horror. Cody said that a key reason for writing the film was to bring to the screen a new way of expressing the intensity of female bonds, and that adolescent female friendships sort of have this unparalleled intensity. And she wanted to show the, quote, almost horrific aspect of such devotion and its relationship to parasiticism, which I think is really fascinating. Cody also said that Jennifer is a product of a culture that pressures girls to be skinny, beautiful, and just like movie stars, and that she hopes the film inspires girls to take life into their own hands and do with it what they want. If I had gone to see this movie as a teenage girl, I would have come out of it feeling totally inspired, she stated. I would have wanted to write, I would have wanted to create, and I would have felt like I watched something that was speaking to me. And that is how I felt when I finished watching this movie. Jennifer's Body, it's not about like the horrors of female sexuality or how monstrous women are, which is often how they're portrayed. It's about how women have been horribly abused for the benefit of male gaze. And that is a movie that I can get behind. And that is a movie about a badass. I think, honestly, both Jennifer and Needy are really cool characters in this movie. And I think you're interesting enough. You're kind of rooting for both of them, even though one of them is a demon. But I think it's worth watching to check out both of them and the relationship that they have to each other. Now, what kind of badass women in horror movies podcast episode would this be if we did not talk about the Scream movies? And I'm guessing if you've clicked a episode like this, you probably have already seen the Scream movies, so I will not go into details about the plot. But I will say, I think Sydney Prescott is possibly the most badass final girl we have ever seen in horror movies. And here's why I think that. When Sydney Prescott goes and kills Ghostface, she really does it. A lot of final girls will escape or destroy the antagonist, the monster, the what have you. And then we see in the sequel that didn't really happen. But when Sydney does it, it gets done. Now, Ghostface, of course, shows up in every single Scream movie, but it's always a copycat. It's always someone new. We don't know who it is. And she gets the job done every single time. And I don't think she's a stupid final girl. She doesn't get lucky. She is clever and smart, and she's really fun to watch in the Scream movies. And that's what I think makes her a fantastic final girl and a really, really cool female protagonist to watch in the Scream series. If you have not watched the Scream movies, what are you doing? What are you doing? This is what you're doing for the rest of October. You're watching the Scream movies. And hopefully if you have seen them, you're like, yep, Sydney is the best. We love her. She is strong. She is resilient. She does not let the trauma that happens to her destroy her life or turn her into a victim. She is a badass through and through. Speaking of badasses, I've saved my favorite for the last. I think she might be my favorite protagonist in all horror movies. We gotta talk about Alien, and we gotta talk about Ripley. If you have not seen the Alien movies, I'd recommend checking them out. They're still going. Alien Romulus just came out, so the series is still happening. But Ripley shows up in the first 3, and I think they're all fantastic. I just rewatched them a couple of weeks ago. I don't have a bad thing to say about any of them. If you're not a fan of body horror or sci-fi horror, this might not be for you. But other than that, I think they're fantastic films, and Ripley is really awesome in all of them. She is, again, a final girl, and she takes down the most monstrous, disgusting alien creature you have ever seen. She uses her wits. She is brave. She is fearless. And this is a spoiler alert for the 3rd movie that she's in, for Alien 3. She does get one of the aliens inside of her. So she does end up sacrificing herself in order to rid the world of this horrible monster, which some corporation, of course, wants and is planning on using it as basically a weapon of mass destruction and some kind of super soldier. That's what they plan to do with this alien creature. And Ripley doesn't let that happen. She recognizes that it's in there. There's no way out of this situation. And in the final moments of her life, the alien tries to escape from her body, and she doesn't let it, because that is how cool she is. It is the bravest, coolest death scene ever, to watch her fall into this molten hot metal or lava. And she, throughout the first 3 movies, just is incredibly brave and heroic. And you watch Ripley and you're like, I hope for 1/10 of the courage that she has. I would like 1/10 of her spirit. And if I had that, I feel like I could accomplish anything. I would rule the world. So if you are looking for a really, really fantastic series of movies to watch this October, I would recommend the first 3 Alien movies and just root for Ripley the whole time, because she comes out on top. She's a fantastic final girl. And in the 3rd movie, when she does what she has to do, you're still rooting for her. I just want the world for Ripley. Those are 5 of my favorite female protagonists that are just total badasses in the horror movies that they're in. So if you're looking for something to watch this October, I'd recommend checking out one, if not all, of those movies. Before we get into this week's Babe of the Week, as I'm calling it, a couple of ways that you can help support the podcast. You can rate us, you can review us, and you can certainly subscribe on any really podcast provider. We're also on YouTube. And if you want to really, really, really help out the podcast, the best thing you can do is book a boudoir session with me. You can find my work at bucksandboudoir.com. I'm on all social media as Bucks and Boudoir as well. I hope you will come find my work. And if you're interested in booking a session, please, please, please feel free to reach out. Also, on November 2nd, I am co-hosting a wellness retreat, a one-day workshop with Navigate Wellness here in Port Washington, Wisconsin. It's going to be really fun, a full day of healing and self-discovery and just awesomeness like that. And I will be doing like a mini photo shoot with everybody at the very end of the day to kind of capture the essence of who you are. So if you're interested in that, I'm going to make sure that there is a link to that in the description of this episode as well. So check that out. And that's kind of how you can help out the podcast if you're looking to do so. Okay, so this week, right, the last couple of episodes, I've introduced this new segment where I talk about really cool women who are out doing really cool stuff. I do not have a specific woman for this one. And instead, I just want to give a pat on the back to anybody who's had to do something scary recently. It's intimidating. It's straight up terrifying sometimes, and we don't really get any recognition for doing hard stuff, especially as we become adults. Nobody's giving you, a gold sticker anymore for doing the scary and hard thing. So here is my way of sending you a virtual gold sticker. Doing scary stuff is really hard, and it doesn't get easier as we get older. So if you have done the hard thing, if you've done the scary thing, I'm very, very proud of you. You deserve all the hugs, all the treats. You did the dang thing. And if nobody has acknowledged that yet for you, that's what this is. I'm acknowledging that you did a good job doing the hard, scary thing. Give yourself a pat on the back. You deserve it. All right, that is everything, folks. I will leave you with the final reminder that I leave you always with, and that is that your body is a good body and you deserve to be gentle to yourself. You deserve to be kind to yourself. May we all have a little more of that final girl energy in us and just take the world by storm. Bye.